sharing this as well now?
Sorry. Yep, table of contents. That's what I've got.
Okay, because I just calibrated between the two.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm letting everyone in. Hi, everyone.
Okay, terrific.
I'm Tamsin Gilbert. I'll just let everyone get in from the waiting room. All right. Welcome to the Meet the Author. Today we've got David Sheinberg with us. David is a scholar, practitioner of theatre, drama, performance with a particular expertise in casting oral productions. He has worked as a writer and text editor and serves as an artistic and conceptual consultant, offering insights and creative solutions both within and beyond the performing arts. As a teacher and lecturer, he focuses on fostering creative learning strategies and guiding students through every stage of academic writing, from generating ideas and framing arguments to assembling bibliographies and reference. An academic and perpetual student at heart, David is driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge and lifelong passion for learning. Until he either loses interest or the next plot twist grabs his attention. Today, we have David with us to talk about audiobooks as artifacts. And with that, I will pass it over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Tamsin. Hello, everybody. It occurred to me that it's been just, the book has been published just a year ago. So it's still, even though it's been brewing for quite a while, it's fairly new. And I'm still seeking the feedback and really contemplating the next step. Does everybody hear me correctly? Sound okay? Terrific, thank you. So basically, yeah, I mean, my expertise originates in the world of theatre arts, and I later moved on to the philosophy of the arts, which essentially for me nowadays is the two main questions are what would make something constitute an artwork, and which I think is the easiest step. And the next more interesting step would be, okay, having understood why something would be an artwork, let's delve into it and investigate whether or not it's actually good. So that's the main theory I applied into the field of audiobooks, is called the new institutional theory of art. I'll just show a bit of the table of contents, so you can get a grasp of the story of the book, the research. So that's basically what chapter 1 is about, introducing the philosophical approach, which is the new institutional theory of art, and then the actual application of it. I'll just move back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So just a really brief background. The theory originated in the early 60s, and especially with Andy Warhol's Brillo Box. The attempt by Arthur Danto was to try and establish a theory that could give an answer what makes Brillo Box in the museum an artwork, as opposed to the same exact Brillo Box with the identical aesthetic properties, which you can see in the supermarket. And he came up, Arthur Danto, with the conception of an art world, the atmosphere, and that would be the given circumstances, essentially, that would render something an artwork. Later on, George Dickey applied Danto's conception of the artwork and conceived of the notion of an institutional theory of art. Again, I'm really going through this quite briefly. The main distinction that would constitute an institutional approach is the distinction between brute facts and institutional facts. So for instance, someone's ability of running really, really fast has essentially no meaning, no value in and of itself. Once you take someone's ability of running really, really fast and you insert that into a framework of the Olympics, for instance, then you can begin talking about different kinds of human achievements and different values. When you apply this into art, the same brute fact, institutional fact, works with most anything. One of the best examples is, for instance, Jackson Pollock paintings. On the one hand, the brute fact, it's a big canvas with just drippings of paint. And the institutional fact, once you know how to look at it, how to experience it, then you can understand why it's art, and later on you can delve into what makes it good. So the four basic rules of what art is, according to the new institutional fact. Sorry, so you have the practice itself, you have the object, and next you have the person, the artist, and the set of persons, the audience. In a way, each clause in the theory is dependent on the other one. The analogy is usually a game of chess. In order to understand the role of the king, you have to understand what the checkmate move is. So they both, at the same time, define one another. So that helps us understand what makes something an artwork. The next stage is what makes something good. And this is the best definition I could find of what makes something beautiful. The notion of beauty in art is a particular object is deemed beautiful when and to the degree that it embodies and exhibits the internal logic of its own world. So in a way, one should understand that everything should have some kind of internal logic to it. One should be able to identify what that is. And when you combine that analytic knowledge and actually seeing it, experiencing firsthand, when those two things come together, then, wow, it's beautiful. So the whole notion of beauty in the eye of the beholder, it's a nice way of engaging with other individuals, getting to know what other people enjoy, what they like. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with art. Okay. So this is basically my application of the new institutional theory of art into the field of audiobooks. I was trying to understand, having developed this passion, I think since my childhood, to recorded spoken word recordings, just trying to play around with, okay, when would these things, audiobooks, constitute artworks, and which other types of recorded material could answer the same general definition. So the most standout cases in this genre, the mother institution, are audiobooks and radio drama. In the book, I later on show, okay, aside from these audiobooks, you have audio commentary tracks and different kinds of recorded material that could answer the same definition. So basically, the praxis of oral artifacts, which is what I regard these types of artworks as, count as an exclusive art world system. That is, a distinct aesthetic category in its own right, if and only if it establishes a particular framework that governs the creation and presentation of oral artifacts by performing artists for the benefits of a designated audience, all amid the confines of a predominantly oral medium. And this, again, follows the original definition. Then you have, oh, sorry, skipped one. Within the general, the institutional definition, I applied the notion of what would be the artist within these confines. and the set of persons, the designated audience. Okay. And altogether, they help define one another. Now, what do we listen to when we listen to audiobooks? In the book, I emphasize the idea that audiobooks should not constitute a substitute for reading. Many people who object to listening to audiobooks find it as if they're, why should I listen to somebody else narrate or read something when I can engage with it myself? I love hearing the different, voices myself. So as an aesthetic experience, it should not substitute the act of reading. It's two different kinds of engagements, just as you wouldn't necessarily watch a film based on a novel instead of reading the actual work. Now, I chose as one of the major examples in the book Huckleberry Finn for two main reasons. One is that I think the first-person narrative lends itself exquisitely to the genre, and the other reason is because the book is essentially written in dialects, and it even has, I'll go to it in a few moments, the Twain's instructions of how one should read it. This would also entail that, just as there could be good audiobooks, you would have bad audiobooks, and then the manner in which you would have to compare the idea of the internal logic is to what extent the audiobook as an oral work exhibits the internal logic, not only of what an audiobook should be, but of the text. That is the internal logic of what Twain's novel is about. So I've chosen just a few examples. In the book, I've surveyed, I think, over 60 recordings. This is just a very small selection of specific parts.
Notice: persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot. By order of the author, per G.G., Chief of Ordnance. Explain.
One.
Notice: persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot. By order of the author, per G.G., Chief of Ordnance.
Notice: persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot. By order of the author, per G.G., Chief of Ordnance.
And number 4.
Notice: persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot. By order of the author, per G.G., Chief of Ordnance.
Now, just as in art, the art world and different other types of artwork, one can certainly have their own preference, their own taste of, among these, for instance, I assume each of you, if I would ask which one you preferred, there'll be some different answers and for different reasons. But setting that aside, again, just like the notion of beauty isn't in the eye of the beholder, isn't necessarily at least, once engaging with what the work is about and what the art of oral artifacts is, you could essentially really find a hierarchy between the different recordings.
Explanatory. In this book, a number of dialects are used, to wit, the Missouri Negro dialect, the extremist forms of the backwoods southwestern dialect, the ordinary Pike County dialect, and 4 modified varieties of this last. The shadings have not been done in a haphazard fashion or by guesswork, but painstakingly and with the trustworthy guidance and support of personal familiarity with these several forms of speech. I make this explanation for the reason that without it, many readers would suppose that all these characters were trying to talk alike and not succeeding. The author.
In some cases, by the way, from the different recordings I've surveyed, even this, this last short paragraph, you actually hear different audiobooks that, companies invested money in, time and effort and, production value, and still they do actually sound alike, or they don't, according, I mean, when you think about what Twain intended, it doesn't work as an audiobook.
Explanatory. In this book, a number of dialects are used, to wit, the Missouri Negro dialect, the extremist form of the backwoods southwestern dialect, the ordinary Pike County dialect, and 4 modified varieties of this last. The shadings have not been done in a haphazard fashion, or by guesswork, but painstakingly, and with the trustworthy guidance and support of personal familiarity with these several forms of speech. I make this explanation for the reason that without it, many readers would suppose that all these characters were trying to talk alike and not succeeding. The author.
Explanatory. In this book, a number of dialects are used, to wit, the Missouri Negro dialect, the extremist form of the backwoods southwestern dialect, the ordinary Pike County dialect, and 4 modified varieties of this last. The shadings have not been done in a haphazard fashion or by guesswork, but painstakingly, and with the trustworthy guidance and support of personal familiarity with these several forms of speech. I make this explanation for the reason that without it, many readers would suppose that all these characters were trying to talk alike and not succeeding.
And the last example.
Explanatory. In this book, a number of dialects are used, to wit, the Missouri Negro dialect, the extremist form of the backwoods southwestern dialect, the ordinary Pike County dialect, and 4 modified varieties of this last. The shadings have not been done in a haphazard fashion or by guesswork, but painstakingly, and with the trustworthy guidance and support of personal familiarity with these several forms of speech. I make this explanation for the reason that without it, many readers would suppose that all these characters were trying to talk alike and not succeeding. The author.
Okay. Now, before I move on to this one, go back to the table of content. Okay, so the first 3 chapters basically establish the criteria for classification, which should later on move into the section of evaluation. Is it any good? And Hakfen, again, as a basic example, considering also that it's the first person spoken as Hak. And if you've noticed, I think here only one of the performers is actually much younger, when Hak is supposed to be an adolescent. And then what does that mean when you listen, either to a very young voice, to a very old voice? In certain instances, one of them, by the way, is Jack Lemmon. He sounds really old, and then the novel, as again a first-person narrative of an adolescent, sounds like an old man thinking back about his childhood in a way similar to like crap last tape is for me the association. Then I make a small pause in chapter 4 where the notion of the ear sores are, the bad examples or the false friends, and other different types of recordings, including For instance, books that are recorded for the blind and visually impaired. There is a LibriVox website, if anybody's heard of it. Its volunteers can record anything they want themselves, as long as it's in the public domain. And then it's really, one begins to question, why should there be so many versions of a particular text? Not everyone is a professional reader. They may have a great deal of passion for the material, but it doesn't work as an audiobook or as an oral artifact. I also included various experimental sound recordings. For instance, Marshall McLuhan issued an LP that was just, you can say weird stuff, but then it's how do you look at it that it might not necessarily just be weird. It's not just a canvas with blots of paint. There is a way to listen to it. There is a way to experience it. It could be really, aesthetically flawed, but one first needs to know how to engage with it. So these are all the borderline examples, and that includes, for instance, the oral audio commentary track. For the uninitiated audio commentary tracks, you have an option on DVDs and Blu-rays to choose different alternate soundtracks. And at one point, the Criterion Collection, a company based in the US, thought it would be interesting to add as a bonus feature different lectures and insights that you could listen to professionals speak about a film as you're watching it. And then it developed into directors and actors sometimes speaking about their parts, about the experience, about the making of. And certain instances, one of the main ones I mention is, if anybody has heard of Spinal Tap, in the audio, it's basically a fake mockumentary, and in the commentary track they created, they do it in character, so that extends the existence of the fictional characters, and you have them so-called commenting on their own actions. I later move in chapter 5 to discuss the prose of Beckett, specifically Molloy, the first novel in the trilogy. What I found interesting there, again, it really lends itself into the text, into being performed, and the audiobook versions, the ones I investigated, one of them is performed by a single performer, and another one has two different performers for the two main protagonists. And it can change the experience of the novel, for better or worse. I later moved on to Barry Humphries and Dame Edna in particular, and the manner in which Humphries performs the novels in character as Dame Edna. So you have Dame Edna performing her own autobiography, and in a way she becomes an agency. It's a she becomes an agency in her own right. Let me go back now because to the AI. Okay. So now this is a bad example of an AI.
Explanatory: in this book a number of dialects are used, to wit, the Missouri Negro dialect, the extremist form of the backwoods Southwestern dialect, the ordinary Pike County dialect, and four modified varieties of this last. The shadings have not been done in a haphazard fashion, or by guesswork, but painstakingly, and with the trustworthy guidance and support of personal familiarity with these several forms of speech. I make this explanation for the reason that without it many readers would suppose that all these characters were trying to talk alike and not succeeding. The author.
I'll get back to this again at the end, because AI is developing all the time. Now, just a few examples of what happens when you have exceptional performers.
My name is Dustin Hoffman, and I've been reading Being There by Jerzy Kosinski. Every Tuesday morning, Chance carried a large, heavy leather suitcase down from the attic. The reason I think I picked Being There was that I felt like I didn't have to work hard to find a rhythm for it. It was poetically written. Maybe another factor in my choice is that I did know Jerzy Kosinski back then and when.
So notice how he really conducts himself in a way, just like an orchestra.
Sat down on the bed and flicked the channel changer several times. One of the things that Jerzy does say is that he says that when Chauncey turns on the TV, whatever identity he has, and he suggests that he doesn't really have an identity, that identity has become sucked in by the media of television. He gets his sense of identity by looking at the image of himself. One of the things he was saying was that we're so unaware of how TV alters us. And he wrote this, I think, in the 70s, and it's a much more sophisticated way of getting into your brain now. He turned the set off. The image died. Only a small blue dot hung in the center of the screen, as if forgotten by the rest of the world to which it belonged. It's hard.
Okay.
His eyes drifted back to the chasm, and his ears twitched. I had not dreamed that decay had gone so far. If the bridges themselves are breaking, it may be that I cannot find the path you want. It may be that I cannot find a path back either. The bridges could be falling behind us even now. There has to be a way, Perrin said, his voice flat. His eyes seemed to gather the light, to glow golden. A wolf at bay, Rand thought. Startled. That's what he looks like. It will be as the wheel weaves, Moraine said. But I do not believe that decay is as fast as you fear.
One other issue that forms, on the one hand, it's not my conclusions, and on the other hand, it's also what somehow began the research for me. The question if one can intuitively know whether or not whether a particular text can actually fit very well a particular performer, even without it necessarily having been recorded. So I regard this as playing with matches and with one's intuition. And I've also interviewed some casting directors, and it's never really been addressed what that intuitive process or the eureka moment of, yes, this particular text with that particular performer should actually yield a very good performance if everybody does their job right. And I'm sure if either of you can think of a novel you know well, and if you find or you can think of a performer that you know their voice or their abilities, you could make an intuitive argument why that person can and should deliver a particular work. As for AI, I think I can close the PowerPoint. Yeah, and feel free to ask me anything if you have any questions, of course.
We do have some questions in the chat. If you'd like me to just call on people, we can start.
Yeah, please. Okay, I think
that the first person is Mary. Mary, would you like to ask your question and unmute? Oh no, you've unmuted already.
Hello, David. It's a fascinating book, and
thank you.
So appropriate in this multimodal moment. There's so much in it. When I was a very young woman, On the radio, they wouldn't have female voices, right? Because they said female voices were too shriek, they weren't appropriate, and the audience wouldn't have them. I presume those biases don't exist, or do they? And when you choose an author that's a reader that's not the author, because I think we can tolerate the author because they're the author. Are there biases that still pertain when they make those kind of choices around dialect and accents? Is that emerging?
I haven't come across any biases in my research, but I know that sometimes, at least listeners, and in some research, it's a very small a company of researchers who approach the topic. It's very under-theorized, but I know that listeners to audiobook who listen on a daily permanent basis, they have very strong opinions about their own favorites,
Right.
and I think it really depends on the work itself, because they're just like any acting role, I would believe. You should have a way to connect with characters, a deeper understanding, in order to perform it much better. But I haven't come across any particular biases.
Right. No, thank you. I think a lot of research needs to continue in this domain, but
Yeah.
very important work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, what I was hoping to say, that the future of AI, the biases that it still has, is rooted on the biases that people have, or had at least, and it's very interesting nowadays. I think I'm less concerned about issues of I'd like to be less concerned about issues of copyright, or ethical, moral questions when it comes to performing different works, or utilizing one's voice with their permission.
Right.
But I think an interesting case could be made when one would, if a novel tracks a certain character's age across time,
Oh,
it
right.
could be interesting to see what the potentials of AI can be when it comes to fine-tuning that particular voice, imagining it in different stages of their life. Especially if it's a performer who has been alive for a long time, and one is acquainted with the way their voice or their craft changed with time. AI could essentially utilize that.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Fascinating.
We have a next question from William Cope. Are you able to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yes. Is my camera working? Yeah, it's working. So look, my question is, what is an audiobook? What's interesting is this incredible proliferation of oral things these days in podcasts, in audiobooks, and in a way it's been obviously prompted by the internet and digitization of sound and live streaming. So that's all. But the question is, where does audiobook end and a podcast start? And the other question is, you mentioned AI. Well, Kindle, Alexa will read you a Kindle book, and kind of not too badly, not as bad as the recording that you just put there. But when you can actually select that you're going to have that Kindle book read via voice cloning by Richard Burton, where are we then? So where do these things begin and end? Like, do you require that they're acted for them to be art, for example? And why isn't a podcast in a certain sense that? I mean, so it's a question of definition. We've got these, radically changing media, but what are these things?
Thank you. Thank you very much, William. So yes, podcasts are definitely part of it. That's why I would regard the institution of oral artifacts as the mother institutional category within the art world. And its most prominent examples are audiobooks and radio drama. Then you have all the other branches of the tree, different, what I would regard as sub-institutional categories. Of course, podcasts are a growing industry and a growing genre in their own right. And there are certain podcasts they're also filmed on video. Certain, it's like talk radio. Other ones are more artistic. They are actually written in order to be performed within this medium. And then it really depends to what extent does the fact that it's delivered through this particular oral medium and the fact that it's consumed as an oral work, how does that contribute to its artistry? And so that, I think, would help the issue of definitions. And yes, I do believe still at this point, even as much as AI is continuously advancing, you have to have the human element, the way a human would interpret and be able to deliver within that, within the confines of the medium. And art, essentially, also it's a way of engaging. It's the artist engaging with other individuals, with their audience. And once you have, no matter how good it may sound, there's something missing. I'm slightly apprehensive about making a comparison to the world of savants, but from what I do know and documentaries I've seen, and they may be able to replicate sheet music in the most perfect way. And again, it breaks my heart to say it, and there's something that's slightly missing. I've heard this argument before by people who know more about this than I do, but AI might be able to do that in that way, but it will miss something. With, I think, what in my terms would be the internal logic and being able to exhibit it.
The next question we have is from Miranda. Miranda, are you able to unmute and ask?
Yes, I am. I think you already kind of touched on it a bit, and it's been a long day, so I'm sorry if it's a bit garbled. I was just thinking about the fact that the mode of reading the Audible has taken over from, which is sort of silent solo reading, is itself relatively recent. And you can see the way in which, like Walter Scott novels are designed to be read round the fireplace socially. And if you read them by yourself, like the long descriptive passages, etc., then it can be quite tedious because it's not designed, I think, for that. So yeah, I think you already kind of touched on it, is like, how do you imagine it will affect the style and topics of works themselves? And I completely agree that when it's even if it's cloned voices, the AI doesn't have sentient lived experience, so it's not going to have the same quality as an actor. But I guess another question was, you were just talking about single readers as opposed to cast, and I was just listening to Haruki Murakami's IQ84, and he always puts in music into his novels. And while listening to the Audible, I went off to listen to Janacek's Sinfonetta, and I found going there that another person listening to the Audible was like in the comments going, "I'm here because I'm listening to that." But I suppose there are copyright issues with putting in music sometimes. But yeah, anyway, it's sort of, yeah, how do you think it will affect the style and content? But I think you were already getting into that. Thanks for the talk.
Thank you. Yeah, the issue of copyright is an issue. I remember even speaking with Philip there, the idea of somehow incorporating either with a QR code, actually having readers of this book have the ability, have the chance to listen to the recordings I am analyzing, referencing. Of course, if I regard some of them as flawed, in asking for permission, well, it's a bit problematic sometimes. Because if I bring in the good ones, I have to bring in the flawed ones as well. So that's, I think, about the issue of copyright, but it's definitely a way you can enhance the experience of the work. I think there have been a few experiments about authors writing directly to the oral medium. And one of the very interesting things I mentioned also, it's really with the definition of what is it, because it's a borderline adaptation that involves literature, it involves theater, performance, media, and in a way, really to understand whether or not to evaluate the what it is, one has to delve in deep. What is the novel about? And you mentioned about the music. Also, there have been some studies about where does one listen to a novel? Because if you take a train, I don't know, from London to Edinburgh, and you listen to a novel that describes the Andes or the Sahara Desert, the view that you see outside the window of the train wouldn't, it would affect, in a way, there will be an incongruency. But if you take a different novel, like Thomas Hardy or something, it's then where you are in the space-time continuum, as it were, it would help. It could help enhance the experience. And yeah, various voices. It also, just like a radio drama, it would depend on the cast itself. Would have obviously a director or a sound engineer, somebody that would have to proof listen to know whether or not it's working. I think it would also contribute to the idea of comparative listening, especially when there are different versions of the same text, because you could have the same novel performed by one person, the same novel performed by a cast. And then how would one experience that? And there is also the notion of the questions of how would you listen to a novel not on your own. Could be at home alone with headphones, or just you can listen to it while doing other things. But there are very few works, I think, that you could experience as a communal experience. Some things might work, some things might not necessarily work for that. Again, I think depends on genre and how much one would engage with it. What I'm trying to work on now is also investigating the world of children's literature. If I think, which is was my gateway into this world, but how would a child, be affected by listening to different languages, intonations, acquiring a language, just listening to words, letting their imagination run. Do they do it alone in the room? Are your parents there? So it's also part of it, I think. How does one listen to it? I hope I answered and not asked.
We have another question. Did you want to unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your. I really like today's subject because I'm so interested about the voice sound, and especially I need to asking about do you have the research about the other sound? Already you answer about some part of things, but then human voice as they read the book, because I study about the product and service design, and it depends on genre, it depends on what kind of context, but this text of the story and sound, story, but there they need to some background of sound or some stuff of sound, product of sound or animal sound and some other sound. So this is very important to explain about the era of time. So yeah. So this reason, so as audiobooks, as artifacts, the other sound also important of the record as data, because nowadays we are as the AI time. So the data is most important to record this moment. So I need to
Yes.
asking about the other sound. Other sound, yes. Do you have research about the other sound? Yeah.
But you mean non-human voice or AI? You mean
Non-human.
background?
Yeah, background and background.
Mhm.
Yeah, background sound.
I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think it would again depend on the extent to which the recording, or let's say the production value, at what point would it be considered too much to add the background music, or if it's describing something outside or inside, then you could have different echoes, different non-human voices, added sound effects, basically. So I was more interested in the way the human performer is able to translate what's on the printed page into a spoken form, and when you have a way to compare between different recordings of the same text, it's different worlds.
Okay.
Have I answered the question, or?
Not maybe my question is not really correct. For example, the sound of the the
It's okay.
for example, the sound of the weather things, and yeah, as you talk about the background sound, but the
Yeah.
things very important to the situation and things. So when the audiobooks, when we understand more detailedly, that is most important, the background sound. So of course the story is of course the story is very important, but my meaning is the data.
No, I understand. I think I understand. It's a good question, and it depends. I think if I understand it correctly, again, I would say the production value,
Yeah.
because in a way, the words, when you read it on your own, the words would let you imagine everything that's external to it. When you listen to the human voice describing that, it should have somehow the same effect. So sometimes it could be a nice garnish or a decoration, and sometimes it could really enhance the experience. It depends. I think it's really about the director or the sound engineer or the whole production deciding, would this work here, or is it just because we can add it, we'll add it? Or wait a minute, what happens when one actually listens to it? If it's a storm, if it's something, internal, external, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have one more sort of comment from Professor William Cornwall, who it looks like had to leave. It says, interesting presentation, and personally I liked Grosvenor Gardner's audio selections of Huckleberry Finn the best, and Elijah Woods' the least, aside from the awful AI voice. I don't know if you wanted to sum things up, David, and say a few words just before we head off. just
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has, I usually like to end with the notion of playing with matches. If anybody feels like sharing anything that came up to them, during the lecture, if so and so would narrate a particular work that you're acquainted with, and you have a strong feeling about why that would work, I find that very interesting. I also like to compare it, usually it's easier for people when it comes to music, if this or that artist would have, create a cover version for a particular work, song, or composition. Usually people have very strong ideas why that should work, and I think that could be applied to the same world of audiobooks or just spoken word.
fantastic. So we will send around the recording for those who weren't able to join us today. I've put the link for the book in the chat so everyone can follow along. If you're a Research Network member, you can download that PDF just by logging into your account. And with that, I'll say thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.